What do you do when you realize that the key to unlocking human potential lies within the very fabric of understanding ourselves? Today, I welcome Jim Marshall to LifeJack, the Resilience Podcast. With over 50,000 hours devoted to studying and practicing various dimensions of human development, Jim is a true pioneer in the field. With a strong educational background, including a Bachelor of Science with honors and a deep exploration of transformational and holistic arts, he has created an entirely new subject known as septimics. Jim's journey of resilience is not just about personal achievements, it's about empowering others to understand themselves on a deeper level and navigate life's complexities.
Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were life-jacked.
Hi, Jim. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much.
Now, Jim, can you share what initially sparked your interest in the study of human potential and how has it evolved over the years?
Well, there's actually two questions there. As to sparking the interest, I've given this a lot of thought. I actually was born with that interest. I have no memory whatsoever of a time when I was not intensely interested in learning everything taught in every university. Now, of course, that's impossible, but the spark is still there.
And then how do you think human potential has evolved over the years?
Okay. Well, obviously, most of us in this field realize that there is some evolution going on in the human race. And there's a lot more awareness now of human dimensions that were unknown 50, 60 years ago. So, in a sense, while I was developing this subject, the audience was developing for it.
You know, it's interesting because I think about different things that people are able to do, like the various feats that people are able to accomplish. And you're right. I mean, 50, 60 years ago, there are just some things we would have never thought that people could accomplish when now people are absolutely doing them. And it's amazing. Whereas now it's commonplace to find people dunking basketballs, right? Or jumping really high or hurdling over people as what happened recently in a football game with the Eagles. But that's something that wouldn't have been heard of about 50, 60 years ago in a basketball or a football game.
Right. What I find interesting about this is that I sort of started out my life born with psychic abilities and was smart enough to keep my mouth shut. And so I am kind of surprised that the race is sort of caught up with me. And there are actually people out there who I can discuss these things with. Most of my life I was isolated.
I understand that. And so even just aside from sport, what are some other, development have you seen that assuming we've evolved over the years to figure out? And what have we been demonstrating?
One person who I follow online recently said, the crazy people are getting crazier and the sane people are getting saner. And I think that's a pretty good encapsulation of what's going on, because the wildness of the insanity is much worse than it used to be. On the other hand, you have a lot of really brilliant, enlightened people now who wouldn't have been allowed to speak 50, 60 years ago.
No, I understand that because they say like people like Albert Einstein and other, intellectuals, they said, well, actually they had a lot of mental health issues. What do you think about that?
There does seem to be some correlation between people who are very bright or very gifted and not really fitting in with the rest of the human race. That's been around a long time. That's not a new idea, but that does seem to be a phenomenon. I mean, you have people who are geniuses who have some real flaws that people are aware of, and so we kind of overlook those flaws because the person's a genius. So we want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I know when you think about human potential, and especially in our day and age where we have social media, which is a new thing, right? Which is another development that wasn't here 50, 60 years ago. Really, even 20 years ago, we didn't really think about it because that 20 years ago is when the first smartphone was really introduced, with the iPhone. And so here we are 20 years later. But, one of the things that I know people do is they say when people become famous, even if it's just social media famous, and I'll point out like people like the Kardashians, right? They say, well, they don't really have any talent. They don't really do anything. But I don't know about you, but I feel like they absolutely have talent. They have this talent of winning people over. That's absolutely a talent.
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, it's a question of personal preference. Different people have different talents. For example, I was a serious athlete and a sports fan for many years, but I'm really not interested in hearing what athletes have to say. In addition to being inarticulate and poorly educated, they're generally not very smart. But I still love watching them do what they do. So, it's kind of a different area.
And then you have the business moguls like the Jeff Bezos with Amazon and the Elon Musk with Tesla, and you think, okay, well, what is their talent? Because they're really not the ones coming up with all these great ideas, right? I mean, they have the ideas, they're running the companies, but they have engineers that are working for them. But they're the ones reaping all the benefits. But do you see that as maybe just pure luck, or is it some type of talent that they possibly could have?
Well, without putting too fine a point on it, I guess you might say I don't believe in luck. Like Mr. Spock used to say, I don't believe in luck.
Right?
I think, I mean, you mentioned two people. They're very smart, very talented, very industrious people. And I'm very impressed by both of them. They're very different from one another.
How so?
Okay. Well, as far as Bezos, he built possibly the greatest company in the world. And he did it in an unconventional way, despite a lot of criticism, a lot of naysayers. He didn't listen to them. He did it his way, and he was proven to be right. And now he's going on to bigger and better things like space travel. As far as Elon is the chief engineer of SpaceX. Think about that. He is possibly the most impressive man on Earth. If you look at all the different things he's done, all the businesses he's created, all the wealth he's created, he is becoming really a heroic figure. I would say he's like a Randian figure if you've ever read Ayn Rand.
No, most definitely. It's interesting how they are the people who are taking risks. And when you talk about resilience, well, they absolutely have to have an incredible amount of resilience. And so,
That's right.
what do you feel is the relationship between resilience and human potential?
I don't think you can separate the two. I mean, having had a career as a human development engineer and having worked with hundreds of people, when you improve the person, his resilience improves, even if he's not going for that, even if he's not aware of it, it does. And when a person goes downscale, the person's resilience diminishes, which is why when people have bad things happen to them, they reach for drugs and alcohol and food and other things that are not good for them in excess. because they're not resilient enough. It could easily have been, if you really know about Elon Musk, I mean, he went through a lot to get where he is. And if he were the average person, he would have wound up in a very different place from where he is. So he obviously was remarkably resilient. I mean, he slept on the floor in his factory for years, the owner of the company, so that he would get up, take a shower, and just keep working around the clock. To me, that's resilient.
No, absolutely. Now, you dedicated an incredible amount of time to your research and your practice. Are there any significant discoveries that you've made during this journey?
The short answer is yes, I've made many significant discoveries. The one that I think is most worth mentioning is septemics, which is a philosophical science, which is, I put it into a book so that people would be able to access it and use it to improve themselves. And I have seen over a 29-year period that it works. People get it. So that was really a product of the work that I do with my clients. This material sort of presented itself to me, and then I was able to develop it into something that was really user-friendly.
Awesome. So, could you explain the concept of systemic?
Okay. Chemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to human beings occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down Earth's human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. And there are 35 such scales, each of which is unique, and together they span the spectrum of human experience. By which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty that any person has can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
So, how does this differ from the other traditional approaches to understanding human behavior, like of psychologists and sociologists?
First of all, they tried for years to limit septemics into some pre-existing niche, and I can tell you that is impossible, cannot be done. Septemics is an entirely new subject. It's much bigger than philosophy or psychology. And if you study it, you'll see that it's obvious when you read the book how big it is. So it's its own subject. It's an entirely new subject, and it's revolutionary in that it is a quantum leap forward for mankind to the extent that people find out about it and use it.
And you have some principles of systemic that can help individuals achieve their goals faster and easier. So, can you provide an example of exactly how this works? Of course, you just explained the theory. So, how does it work in practice?
Okay. So let's say you have a girlfriend, Mary, who's having romance problems. Every time you see her, she complains about her boyfriend. He does this and he does that. I don't know what I'm going to do, blah, 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 right? So you get tired of hearing this after 6 months and you say, Mary, let me show you something. So she comes over and you open the book, the septemics book, to the scale of relationships. Put it in front of her face and she will say something like, you mean the scale of relationships? You say, yes. This relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? Guaranteed, she's going to want to answer that question because you're helping her. Now, she'll look at the scale, and in a matter of seconds, she will find a bracket, by which I mean she'll say something like, well, I can see right away, Ro, that levels 1, 2, and 3 have nothing to do with us. That's the top of the scale, and we're having a lot of trouble. So we would have to be at 4, 5, 6, or 7. And you say, okay, go ahead and read the text, and then you can get it exactly. Well, if she knows the relationship, she's been living in the middle of it. When she's studying the material, she'll spot it. And she'll come back and she'll say, well, now that I read it, I can see we're at level 5, for example. And she, at that moment, will have an insight. She'll say, that explains a lot. That's why when John does this, I do that, or something like that. She will have an epiphany. Then you could say to her, you could move your relationship from 5 up to 4. She says, you can? You say, yeah, it goes in the book how to do that. She said, well, I want to do that. So she could take this then to John and say, look at this, see, and get him interested in it, and they could use it to improve the relationship. Now, John might not be interested. He might say, I don't want to hear about this, go away. And she might just say, well, the hell with you, I'm just getting somebody new. And if that happened, she would not be upset about it. She would be relieved. She would say, I didn't realize this guy is a loser, and he is not going to cooperate with me. I'm going to get somebody who loves me, you see? So then you could say to her, now, let me show you something else. And you open up the book to the scale of sexuality. Oh, this is relevant, isn't it? Then he's going to look at this and say, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? And you say, yeah, you don't have to tell me if you don't want, but where are you on this scale? Guaranteed, she is going to want to know that. So she will inspect it. In a matter of seconds, she will find the bracket. She will say something like, I can see right off that 6 and 7 have nothing to do with me, so it has to be 1 through 5. You say, fine, go ahead and read the text, then you can get it exactly. So she does it. She comes back and says, well, now I can see I'm at level 4. And she will have a realization. She will say, that explains why this, and this. Now, I think he's doing this for all the scales because in a romance, it's complicated. There's a lot of things that fit into it. Easily, she could find 20 different scales that are relevant to her situation out of the 35. Well, either of herself or her mate. She has an insight. So she's getting smarter. She's literally getting smarter on this subject. So you will be figuring this out and doing much better. And that's generally how this works.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you've emphasized the importance of education, which you just gave an example of, meditation, and self-discipline in building resilience. So can you elaborate on how each of these elements contributes to personal development?
Okay, well, I'll start with meditation. I've been meditating for over 40 years on a daily basis. I'm completely unrecognizable from the person I was when I started out. I'm a completely different person. All of my values, the way I think, the way I emote, completely different. And of course, one of the things I did was a particular level of resilience, both emotionally and intellectually. So basically, I don't get upset, I don't worry, I'm not critical of people, I don't get angry. That's all about resilience, Somebody yells at me, I don't argue with them, that's fine. I just say, well, tell me about that. Now, the other one you talk about is self-discipline. There is no improvement without self-discipline. If you're not self-disciplined, you're the kind of person who's going to sit on the couch with a bag of potato chips and a beer and watch the basketball game. Okay? That's not self-improvement. There are thousands of systems of self-improvement, many of which have existed for thousands of years, such as Stoicism, which goes back to the ancient Greek. So, but all of them, and I can tell you because I've studied all of these things, require self-discipline. You have to be able to say, okay, I feel like doing X, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this instead. So think about how much resilience it takes to meditate daily for over 40 years. People have to keep coming back to it and getting better and better and better and better. And that's resilience. You mentioned.
And then, of course, you talked about this self-discipline.
Right, but there's another one. The first one, the 3.
Oh, the education.
Right. Well, let's talk about education. Education comes from the Latin word educare, which means to lead out. Now, true education leads the person out. the natural talent and beauty of the person comes out when you educate him. That's different from job training. That's different from trying to get a high-paying job. That's different from getting a degree so that you can impress people because you have letters after your name. Actual education makes a better person. So part of what you get is resilient, especially intellectual resilience, where you're not going to be sold to the Brooklyn Bridge easily because you know a lot. So when charlatans come along and try to give you some kind of a snow job, you're not going to buy it because you know what the facts are. So all of these things are very important to resilience, and I encourage all of the listeners to embrace all of them.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to have self-discipline?
Well, it depends on the person. I mean, I don't know that there's a general answer for this. I mean, some people are very self-disciplined. I had private school education and was involved with a lot of young people who were very self-disciplined. I mean, I went to school where if you didn't do your homework, you got kicked out. So you were eliminated from the body politic. Also, I played a lot of sports. If you're not into it, you can't cut it. Okay, they don't want you on the team. So it depends on what type of a person it is. For example, for most people, if somebody has been in the U.S. military, and I assume this is true in other countries too, that is a selling point. Oh, you're in the Marine? That human resources person is more likely to hire that person because they put you through a lot. And if you're not focused with focused on resilience, you can't make it in the Marine. You won't out. So it depends on the person. Now, there are people who are brought up in very bad circumstances. They don't have parents, or they don't have two parents, or they don't have any money. They grew up in a house that had no book in it. We know about all of these things that go on, and they create barriers for the person. So when a person gets discouraged and he sees all kinds of bad things around him, that makes him sort of not want to make an effort. I have a son, and I raised him from day one to say, you can do this. Like my son was an incredible student. If he came to me and said, I'm not understanding this, I'm having trouble, I would explain it the best I could, and then I would say, look, you can do this. Go back and continue. And he did. I didn't tell him, oh, poor baby, this is too hard for you. Never said that. And the result was he was in the top 1% of 2 of the 3 SAT categories without ever setting foot in a high school. He got into an elite university with a scholarship. And that was all from me telling him, you can do this. Don't tell me this is hard. I know it's hard. Keep studying. And of course, I would help him in little things like, do you know what this word means? Or, do you know how to factor a polynomial? And if he didn't, I'd show him. And then I'd say, all right, you can do this. Go do it. And I did that with my clients, to my many students and clients. That was my attitude. And they would say often in their testimonials, I got this belief from Jim right from the beginning that I could do this because that is what I instilled in them. Because regardless of where they were coming from. And it worked. It worked. There's a power of positive thinking. You have ability. You can do this. You need to have some discipline, keep practicing, or whatever it is.
Now, reflecting on your journey, what advice would you give to someone who feels overwhelmed and they're having trouble tapping into their own potential?
First of all, if the person has a diagnosable mental or physical illness, I would say get professional help. Like if a client come to me once, a wealthy person, he hadn't had what I would call a full night's sleep in 30 or 40 years. So I had to sort of teach her how to sleep, how to not get up at 6 o'clock every morning and take care of the business. And I don't think if you don't do this, you're not going to be able to handle these materials. You're not going to be able to gain enlightenment. You're exhausted. So it depends on a lot of it depends on the person. But if somebody is doing reasonably well, in other words, he's got a house, he's got a family, he's got a job, he's not in bankruptcy or anything, the best thing is find out about systemics because it will enhance your life across the board, no matter what's going on with you.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your remarkable insights into human potential and how it relates to resilience. Your work through Septemic has the potential to change lives. I believe that. And offering a unique perspective that empowers individuals to understand themselves and navigate their goals with clarity. I appreciate your dedication to this field and the knowledge you've imparted on the audience and listeners today. So, how can listeners find and connect with you?
Well, I'd like to invite your listeners to my website, which is septemics.com, SEPTEMICS, where you can see what many readers have said about it, many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself, and there's even a 15-minute pre-recorded introduction to Septemics, which you can listen to, which will explain it to a new person in 15 minutes.
Awesome. Any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
Yeah, I would say that the data in Septemics is vital for every human being and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Well, Jim, once again, I appreciate you for being a guest on Lifestack, the Resilience Podcast. I look forward to seeing how your teachings continue to inspire and transform lives. I wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. Please take care.
Thank you.
Jim Marshall, everyone. Be sure to join me next time for more uplifting stories and insights on resilience. Until then, keep pushing forward, embrace the journey, and remember that every setback can lead to a greater comeback. Dr. Rose, signing off.